All right, my name is Josh, and I'll be responding to my opponent's claim that the development of suburbs has provided a negative effect on our society, which denser forms of development would not create. First, his secondary claims are that the suburbs create a negative effect on the environment. They also create a negative effect on health, and they also create a negative effect on safety. First, I'd like to go over the definition of a suburb, which is, according to Merriam-Webster, is the residential area on the outskirts of a city or a large town. Which brings me to my major claim to refute their argument, which is cities create a negative effect on society greater than suburbs. First, to address their environmental issues, according to a study by UC Berkeley, the development of cities attract the development of suburbs. Cities directly create suburbs to be developed, which creates higher pollution. So in their claim, they're claiming that suburbs have the negative effect more so than a denser form like a city. Well, cities are what create the suburbs around it. So if we're going to develop larger forms of development, we're obviously going to attract suburbs, which does create more traffic and pollution. Which is one of their claims, is that the climate change is affected by the vehicle dependency in suburbs. But it was found that by the LADOT that vehicles in a city area release more toxic pollutants due to high traffic volumes and traffic congestion that leaves cars idling. And as many of you guys know, since we live so close to LA, there's lots of traffic. You usually sit for a couple of hours, sometimes just trying to get from one side of LA to the other side of LA. So you're going to create more pollution than if you're in a suburb area where usually you can get from one side of town to another side of town quicker. Another mention is they claim that the negative effect on the environment is from the runoff created in the suburbs during like storm events, like off your roofs and parking lots and such. But according to the EPA, runoff from roofs, roads, and parking lots is greater in more dense areas like cities. So obviously if you go to a city, you're going to see parking structures all around. You're going to see high-rise buildings, very many apartments, condos. So there's a denser form of development, which means there's more cement and more metals used in that area compared to a suburb where you do have some open green areas. Usually you have backyards. Because it's residential, you have areas where the ground can infiltrate the stormwater instead of having to just use storm drains. So in the end, the runoff from a city, you have 10 times as many buildings, and you don't have any ground coverage. Also, according to Forbes, they found that the California Environmental Protection Agency found Fresno, which is the 5th largest city in California, to be the most polluted due to runoff and population-caused pollution. So that kind of undermines the whole claim about suburbs, because obviously the cities are the ones that are creating the most pollutants. The second claim they have is about the negative effect of health, which they're claiming that obesity is more common in suburban areas. But according to the CDC, obesity occurs everywhere, not just in suburbs. And it also found that it's not even in suburban areas, it's also more common in rural areas, which is smaller than a suburban area. So that's not even really a claim to be supporting their side of the story. So it's like even in the cities, you still have obese people, you still have obesity everywhere. Another thing that they claimed was that vehicles cause pollution, and as I mentioned already before, there's more vehicles in a city area. You have more population, you're attracting more people in because of your businesses, your events, different things. So there's more pollution caused by a city than in a suburban area since there's more traffic. And then the last argument they have is safety, which they claim that flooding in suburbs is greater than other areas because they don't have any way to control the flooding, which according to the EPA, flood and storm events drain into storm systems and canals to keep developed areas safe. So if you're going to live in a suburb, you're probably safer off than if you're in a rural area. And even in cities, you don't have as much infiltration. So actually in a city, you're going to have more likelihood of flooding because you're depending solely on storm drain systems, where in suburban areas, you do have, like I said, the open green areas that ground can infiltrate some of the storm runoff. The last claim they have for safety is vehicular crashes, and they didn't even have any evidence to even support this part, and they didn't really say how many deaths or fatalities from pedestrians or even car accidents happen directly in suburban areas. But according to an Allstate report, human behavior is the leading cause of accidents and suggests that drivers are more likely aggressive in larger cities. So if you're going to be driving in a city, you're more likely to get in an accident than in a suburban area. So as I said before, you have more vehicles, you're going to have congestion, which causes drivers to get angry, upset, and all of us have had that road rage moment where we just want to run the person off the side of the road because we want to get to that event or wherever we're going in the city. So car crashes are actually more likely when you're in a denser area. So therefore, that's why the development of suburbs, I do not believe, create a direct negative effect on society, that denser forms would actually have a larger negative effect. Thank you.
All right, well, the claim and the secondary structure is very clearly laid out at the beginning. You kind of explain a little bit what the suburb is, and it's interesting because you've got a causality argument here that says cities create suburbs. There may be a little bit of a circular argument on this point. The suburbs service the cities, in essence, are the thing that people move away from, so that may be what causes the problem. But I like the attempt here to suggest that there's a bigger causality, and it's mostly the population that is people are the problem, damn them. What the heck is wrong with us? We need less of us. I thought that you had good evidence, though, on the issue with pollution in the city where, the cars are idled, so it leaves out more pollution. I like the idea about the runoff argument. I thought that there was a good explanation of that and a nice theory, and I thought you described that pretty effectively. The example of Fresno as an illustration on that point was also pretty effective. So I think you're doing a good job arguing for your counterclaim on this point. I do think you could use a little bit more direct argument on the evidence and the reasoning of the advocate, but the concept that you've got here is working out pretty well. On the health issue, I think that the obesity argument is a reasonable point that you're making here. I think we need a little bit stronger contrast to the advocate's evidence, but the notion that the CDC says obesity is present everywhere, you mentioned maybe that it's more frequent in rural areas, but the idea is that it's what connection it has to the density of the population was never clearly explained. I think that's a good argument that you're making there. You kind of repeat your vehicle pollution issue argument here, which I thought was a good application of that argument. And then on the safety issue, you did challenge a little bit the evidence that the advocate presented on that point. I did like the kind of counterclaim that you make here that suggests that people in those places where the driving is tougher, just get pissier and they drive more aggressively. I'm not sure that this is a strong piece of evidence, but at least it raises a reason to believe the argument that you're presenting. And this, if we were having a debate, we'd have to go through this in a lot more detail. All right, thank you.